Alrighty guys, so we've upgraded the visuals in our game a little bit. I want to get into, the reason for this is I want to get into the animator and the animation system in Unity. Keep in mind those are two very distinct words and they mean different things, right? An animation is, for example, your idle animation or your walk animation. The animator is the tool that uses code and logic to move from one animation to another. So first and foremost, we're going to need to go ahead and get some sprites. You can make them, you can go find them. I found this at I'm using this character from the package link below in the description. I think it's called SunnyLand. I'm blanking on it right now as I'm recording the video. Citing my sources, just like all you should. But what you need to do first and foremost is have the art, right? So for example, let me bring this up a little bit. Oh, it's not going to let me zoom in. That's unfortunate. But you can see that I have a bunch of sprites that I got from that package, right? And now these animations did come with the package, but I went ahead and made my own. I'm actually gonna make a new folder real quick, as you should, called animation materials, and go ahead and drop my animation stuff. So my animations and animator in there. We can delete Rue. It's very sad, but we don't need her anymore. She did her job. Um, and now, how do we actually get into animating, right? First and foremost, we'll need to add an animator component to our character. So if I go and search an animator, you'll see this. You go ahead and add that onto it. And then you'll want to go to your animator window, or your animation window, I'm sorry. And you should see, it won't be the same as mine. Let me go ahead and make a yeah, actually, if you go and um, let's just make a animation for the environment real quick. Pretend I was animating my environment. Doing that will actually, I believe, give you an animator all on your object. So, a quick way to do it, you can add the animator component, like I said, through here, going to add component animator, or you can simply click on your player and go to the animation window, and you should have the same button that I just did when I was on my environment. Um, that being said, so now that you have that, you should have a drop down here where you can create a new clip. Okay, so I'm going to stop animating my environment because I don't really want to do that. I'm going to go back to my player where I've already pre-made some clips for us. Um, you'll want to first and foremost just make all the clips that you need. For me, I have an idle, a run, a jump, and a fall. And you just go ahead and create it, and I'll go ahead and put it in my animation materials. And let's just call this, you know, test animation, right? So looks good. It's all working. We have this here, but it doesn't actually have any frames in it. So I'm going to take my project folder and put it over here by the inspector. And this one, just for the sake of showing, I'm going to drag all my animation frames in. I know that doesn't make sense for like having an actual good animation, but the I just want to basically be able to go through all my frames so I can show you what we have here. Um, Now, this ideally, you might be able to go ahead and hit play and it might just work. However, that's only because I'm going to go to my animator here. The animator picks the first animation you make. So the first one I made was this idle animation, and sets it as default. And you can tell which one is default because it's orange and connected to the entry node. We're not going to look at these other nodes here. There is a any state node and an exit node. We're not going to really worry about those, but we're going to just focus on this. Now this probably looks like a mess to you right now, and that's okay. I'm going to go ahead and set, if it set the animation you didn't want to be your default animation, uh, to the default. So the one, let's say your run is orange and you know you want your idle to be orange, you simply right click on it and set layer as default. Now you'll see that my entire animation web up here that we'll be getting into in a bit is all disconnected. And if I hit play, I'm just going to watch it here. we'll see my character goes through all his animation frames very, very quickly. A little too quickly to actually be able to tell much of it. Now, one key thing that I want you guys to pay attention to, though, is it's also looping. You don't always have an animation that you want to loop. For example, your shoot animation or your jump animation likely won't want to loop from the start. You solve this by double clicking on it, going to the inspector, and unchecking loop. Now, obviously, this isn't going to change anything currently during runtime, but it will when we come back around. Now, if another way to find that, every time you make an animation, you do get a animation item or object in your folder. So this is my test animation. You can see that I unchecked the loop. My idle, I have checked to loop, and I believe my jump, do I have it set to loop? I do. My jump is only 1 frame, so it's fine that it loops. Now, let's go into this test animation. This is going incredibly fast. Okay, if this is 1 second right here, it is doing this in a little bit more than 1/10 of a second. Let's go ahead and make it so that let's expand some of these just a bit. Now, there probably is an easier way to do this, but this is generally how I do it. You take them and you drag them all down the line. So I'm only going to do this for some of them because I don't want to really waste our time here. But we'll see that this, if I'm right, this actually, if we have our player selected, we can actually preview what we have going on here. Let's go to test animation and hit the little play right here. Oh, it looks like I just have the jump frames and like an idle frame. So that's pretty cool. He's like jumping in place, right? And that's about the right speed that I'd want. So let's just double check. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So you have to essentially go and play with the spacing of your keyframes. Now, while we're here talking about keyframes, I do want to show you that there are different things that you can do. You don't necessarily need to just animate sprites. For example, if I wanted to, I don't know. Well, let me take a step back. You enable the changing of other things by hitting this record button or by adding properties. You'll notice that all the things, all the components on my character are an accessible property. So, for example, I'm going to do the record just because I think that's a little bit easier. If I wanted to, I don't know, at this frame, change my scale to 2, 2, 2, I can then watch him go shoot, and he will stay that way, though, until we get through. He won't return back to 0, and we can actually watch the numbers changing here. Now, if I wanted, maybe the next frame him to go back to 1, would be same thing, right? He just is getting bigger and smaller, bigger and smaller. You can do this with all kinds of things, and it's actually a really powerful tool when you have scripted events. And in reality, this, I know we dragged in sprites, but all it's doing is taking this component and changing the sprite that's in it. If I clip through here, you'll see it goes to idle 1, idle 2, idle 3, and then when I come back, it goes to fall again. So, that's how you go about animating things. Now, this is only half the battle, though. Well, I would actually say about 1/3 the battle, because we have to get into the animator. I'm going to go ahead and delete this animation we're working on, just because it doesn't really serve us any purpose. And if I go into Animator here, looks like it's still held on to a reference, but doesn't have an animation in it. This, if you click on every little cell here, it references an animation. So it looks like it will still hold on to the state here. You could think of this as a big state machine. But this is actually what I want to show you guys. This spaghetti web of wires here is how we go about actually driving logic in our animations. Now, you'll start with this layers tab most likely. It isn't something we need to worry about right this minute. We'll want to go over to parameters, and parameters really gets us into the code bits of how the animator works. Now, these are variables that I know I need, and let me explain how I figured that out. We know by default we're going to start in our idle animation, and let's just go there, and I'll hit play over here so we can watch him do his little idle animation. But when we get to actually want to check something real quick. Okay, it does not do that. When we start moving, we're going to want it to play the run animation. So let's go to run animation, and there he goes. He's doing his little run. All right. So in order to know am I running or not, I thought, I'll need a Boolean to tell me am I running or not. And you might think that a number might work better, or a different variable type might work better, and that is completely possible. For my specific code base, I needed a Boolean, and I'll go into the code in just a little bit to show you why. The way you go about creating that is hitting this little plus. It allows you to make a float, an int, a bool, and a trigger. A trigger is essentially a bool that gets set back to false as soon as you get through the animation, the transition here. And that'll make more sense once we actually get this starting to go. So that's how I figured out, let's do a running Boolean. Now, what about jump? Well, just like I said, that trigger will happen as soon as, or will get set back to false as soon as we get through the transition. So as soon as I get through here, when I have this jump trigger set, I would not want it to stay true. I would not want to have to manage it being set back to false. I simply do the jump trigger to take me to here. Now this vertical velocity is actually a float. You can see I can go and I can change, it to 5.2 or change it to whatever I want, really. And this is actually keeping track of my rigid body in the code. It's keeping track of my rigid body's vertical velocity. Am I going up? Am I going down? Because I have a fall animation that I want to implement. So after I've jumped, once I start falling or my velocity is negative, I want to start playing the fall animation. And is grounded simply tells me, hey, am I on the ground? Should I even be in this half of the animations over here? If we check our transitions now, we can ignore a bunch of this for now, but you'll see that I can only get to jump if is grounded equals false. These are the only two transitions going to jump, and that's controlled by our ground ray casting code. It just simply checks and says, hey, set the is grounded in our animator to false when we are no longer hitting the ground, and it only lets us get back to the idle or run animation if is grounded equals true. Now, the way you set up these conditions is simply by pressing this little plus, and it'll show you all the variables in this animator that you can add. Now, vertical velocity is a float, so I can check greater or less than. If I had an int, it would have greater or less than, or equal to or not equal to. It's a little bit more powerful of a variable. I'm going to go ahead and delete this. If you want to delete a variable, you simply click here to highlight it blue and hit the minus button. What else? Oh, so while we're here, this is a little bit of a timeline that you don't need to worry about too much while you're doing 2D. 3D, it'll show you a little bit more details of how you blend animations and whatnot. And that blending of animations is really what I want to get into. As you make transitions, you'll notice, these are not supposed to be checked. You will have by default, here, let's make a transition from run to fall. We obviously wouldn't want that, but actually we might. If we fell off of a ledge, we would want that. So we'll notice that it has all these variables set to random things. This is mostly so that in 3D games, because Unity is built to do 2D and 3D, you can get kind of a blend of animations. My philosophy when it comes to 2D, however, is just uncheck and set everything to 0. Now, this condition, I'll have to do that same thing I did before with the vertical velocity. We'll have to say is less than 0 and make sure we are not on the ground. And that should make it so that if we fall off the edge, we start with our fall animation. Alrighty, so now let's go ahead and just play it, because I want to show you one more thing with the animator and check to see if that fall animation, let's make our ground a little bit smaller, is going to work, I guess we should actually have this here too in case we're have something taken out from under us. So if we're idle, we'll set all these to 0. The web always gets bigger. If you have a giant crazy web, it might feel like you're not doing things correctly, but trust me, you are. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and hit play. And the cool thing about the animator, something that I like about it, is you can actually watch it do its logic. So you can see that it goes from one to another here. And you'll see that there's my little grounded check. I think it's a little bit too high. Did I forget again to set it? I did. Hold on. Let's go ahead and set this. I was playing with it before I started recording. There we go. We jump. Got a little sound effect for the jump. I'll explain that in just a minute. And if we run off the edge... Oh no! The whole world falls. But, yeah, exactly. That's how we can see our animator running through its logic. But the thing is, these variables are great, but they don't get set on their own. We have to go through code and actually set them. So, in our player controller, what I would suggest doing, ignore this audio clip for right now, go ahead and go ahead and make a public variable called myAnimator. Now, if you're just jumping in from other videos, I've done quite a few changes in this, so be sure to read your errors if you're getting them. I went ahead and made a couple things public, changed the way a couple things are laid out. So we'll need a myAnimator, and just so that we don't forget, we'll need an animator. I named it myAnimator. Just so we don't forget to assign it in the inspector, you can either make it private, that should be fine, or actually make it public because no, private would be fine, sorry. We'll set it equal to get component animator so we can just go ahead and grab it right off the start. And then I went ahead and made an update animator function. So animators, really the biggest thing you're going to be doing is using these set variables. For example, we know vertical velocity, I'm going to drag this over, is a float. We made it a float. So we'll want to go ahead and say myAnimator.setFloat. We have to tell it what variable we need in these quotes and then give it the value we're setting it to it. I would want my rigid body's velocity, but only the y component. I don't care. My vertical velocity doesn't care if I'm going left and right. It only cares if I'm falling. Then if this is where it gets a little bit tricky. So my running, we have this x-axis variable, right? And we say that, and it's a float. Now, the reason that we're doing this round to int is, if you notice, you can keep an eye on your x-axis variable. Actually, let's do that here. There's our x-axis. The x-axis doesn't just immediately go from 0 to 1. It actually ramps up a little bit. We have a little bit of a stop. Now, I'm doing this rounding here in the code because when I let go, you'll see that it doesn't immediately go to 0, but I want to have those animations feel snappy. So I round it to an int, which will make it only be 0 or only be 1, and if it doesn't equal 0, then I say that we are running. We're setting the boolean running in our animator to true. Otherwise, we're going to set it to false. Now, I'm going to go over to my jump code real quick. I got it here somewhere because there is one other variable that we need to set, and that is simply going to be in our ray casting code. I also put another variable for the animator here, got it on start, and I'm simply saying, hey, every frame, go ahead and tell the animator if we are grounded or not. We're setting it down here. Actually, it's probably best for us to set that down below here after we've set it, so that way then it's always up to date when we set the animator. This would only be a frame's worth of difference, so not too big of a deal, but always want to keep things a little bit in order. And yeah, that covers all the variables in our animator. So The one other thing I wanted to show you guys is you can run code off of animations. Right now, in our jump code, or let me see where I'm doing this. When we press spacebar, I say play jump. Now, you don't have to worry about this because if you haven't gotten into sound yet, that's okay. But I tell it to go ahead, and I did forget an animation. I tell it to, when you press the space bar, after you clear the checks, go ahead and play the jump sound. And then I tell it to play a sound effect. This is fine. This works absolutely fine. But I'm actually going to take it off and put it in its own function. I'm going to say public void play jump sound effect. Okay, now the reason I did this, and it's important that you keep this public, is you can run animations off of code. So I'm going to click on my jump animation. Go ahead and bring the animator up here. The jump animation is only one frame. This button right here, that's a little nub, allows you to add a little nub up at the top here. And with my player selected, I should be able to click on that nub and access any public function from any of the scripts on my character. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play jump sound effect. Or you know what, I'm going to real quick delete that, hit play, and confirm that our jump sound effect does not play. It doesn't. Okay, let me actually, I don't think you guys have any desktop audio, so let's try that now. OBS, why are you doing this? Oh, well, it would make sense that it's not. Okay, hold on one second. Let's go and trust me there that no audio is playing. Now, if we go over to our player and add the frame to the jump animation, the little nub, we can go play jump sound effect, hit play, and we should ideally... Ha! The reason that it's playing like that, because obviously it's not supposed to do that, is because the jump animation is looping, right? So if I uncheck this, we get our singular little jump sound. That's the power of animations. You can add functions to them. You can do all kinds of stuff. You can edit things that aren't necessarily just the sprite. You can edit in your UI. You can make things completely move around. You can, even if we were to, I don't know, let's do a real quick dumb animation and we're going to call it dumb animation. Didn't even spell it, or did some weird capitalizing there. We're going to boop, boop, and boop again. If we hit play, we'll see, wow, he really does get going, doesn't he? And that is like the power of animations and how you set them up in Unity. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out, or I'm going to stop this, it's giving me a headache. Message me on Discord. Thanks.